My name is Jo Nelson, and the story I want to tell is something that happened that made it possible for me to decide to be with ICA for a long time. I was taking my second course with ICA. My brother and his family were in Chicago, and so I came to this course. It happened to be the weekend of April 7th, 1968. So it was the weekend where the riots happened after Martin Luther King was killed. I came in a car from the University of Iowa with my colleagues from university. They saw what was going on and they turned around and went home. But I stayed. My brother and his family were there and I stayed. So the course I was taking was Cultural Studies 1. And I remember the first thing that happened was that I was sitting in the course. It was downstairs in the building in Fifth City. And I was sitting beside Sheldon Hill, who was bald and older. And in those days, we talked about the generation gap. But I didn't experience any generation gap. He understood what I was talking about. I understood what he was talking about. We were in the same place. Well, being Friday night that weekend, as we were having the course, we started to hear things rumbling outside. And at one point, we saw legs. At the building, the room was below grade, but the window was at grade. Saw legs with gun butts running by, and the riots were starting. So at the end of the session, I went up to my room on the 4th floor and looked around, and there were fires within several blocks of the building on 3 sides, and the 4th side was Eisenhower Expressway. So I decided to go over to my brother's apartment and hang out with them and their little kids. And as we were there, the knock came on the door to evacuate the building. Someone had broken in and tried to start a fire. They put it out. They talked the people back out the door, but we decided it was necessary to evacuate. There was a tunnel between our building, our compound, and the hospital next door. It was an old, unused tunnel. It had been there from years before. We opened it up and we went through the tunnel into the hospital next door and spent the night in the hospital. It was apocalyptic. The National Guard would open the doors to come in to get a cup of coffee, and smoke would pour in. Someone had a transistor radio, and there were reports of massive riots in all the major cities in America. I spent the night trying to keep my niece and nephew occupied because they were, 6 and 4 maybe, very small. The next morning at 6 o'clock, and this is a good thing to know, at 6 o'clock, all the rioters were exhausted, so we walked back across the street back to the Institute. And all of the staff gathered in room A. A couple of the women took the children into another room and did something with them. There were only 3 of us who were not staff of the Institute that were there that day, at that point, because all the other participants had gone home. There was the chair of the board, and I don't remember exactly who it was at that time in 1968. I think it was Don Moffat, but I'm not sure. There was another woman who was a student in Nebraska, and there was me. And we had had a really good way to get out, so we were there. So I stood there at the edge of the room and watched the staff of the Institute talk through all the implications of staying or leaving the community. Clear about the risks, life and death risks of staying in the community, but clear also that they had made a commitment to development in this community, that they would not just leave. And so the community made a decision, the staff made a decision by consensus to stay in the community that they had pledged to work with and to take the life and death consequences of staying there. They decided that the children who had not made a conscious decision to be there would be sent out to friends and colleagues in the suburbs. And the women who were carrying children, who were pregnant, that was the most controversial, that they would also be sent out because they were carrying children who had not made a conscious decision to be there. but that the others would stay and work with the community. As a 19-year-old with no belonging in the community, I got sent out with the kids. And I was sent to the friends of friends of friends who were in Lake Forest, Illinois, which at the time was the richest town per capita in the world. I spent the night there. Their name was Gronke. I spent the night there. They said, "Oh, we have a social engagement that we're committed to. Do you mind if we just leave our teenager with you overnight?" Well, of course, what could you say? And I had two little guys with me, Dietrich Loudermilk and David Prather, who were ages 2 and 1. I didn't know how young they were, and I didn't know much about young children. I spent the night trying to keep them from rolling off the bed. The next morning, then, I was able to call back to the Institute, let my brother know where his kids were, and the other woman was able to get a hold of me, and then we drove together to go home. And of course, it took several days to recover from the shock. But the thing that happened for me was that I saw a group of people make a responsible, conscious, life and death decision to stay where they'd committed their lives. That's why I'm still with ICA. Because rarely in this world do you get to see people do that together as a group and make that kind of a commitment and stick with that kind of commitment. And that was extraordinary, and I wanted to be a part of that body.